Thank you for allowing me to present SB 474. It gets at the issue that I believe the legislature has abdicated its own rulemaking powers by transferring those to an unelected body, and I think it's time to have a conversation about whether the legislature, not the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, should be the appropriate rulemaking body for emission policies, especially greenhouse gases. Unlike elected officials who are accountable to their constituents, CARB members do not directly answer to the public, yet CARB wields significant power in shaping regulations that impact millions of Californians. CARB's regulations have often placed a heavy economic burden on businesses and consumers, while the intention behind these regulations is to protect the environment and moderate climate change. The unintended consequences can stifle economic growth and innovation. By shifting the rulemaking authority to elected officials, we can strike a more balanced approach that considers both the environmental issues and economic stability. Like many of you, I've heard from my constituents and businesses in my district about higher costs of goods and transportation. As Californians struggle to pay bills to keep up with inflation, last year CARB passed controversial updates to their low-carbon fuel standard that very likely will raise gas prices significantly. Other decisions that CARB, not elected officials, have made to ban portable gas generators, ban gas-powered leaf blowers, ban new natural gas heaters, and ban vehicles that do not meet its stringent emission standards. So here's the problem. While CARB has done an excellent job, quite frankly, of what the legislature charged it to do, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, I doubt that many people who are paying those high gas and high utility prices realize that the efforts to reduce those emissions has had zero effect on greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. Zero. You see, California emits less than 1% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And an interesting factoid, by the way, China emits just from its coal-powered utility plants, energy plants alone, emits more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire United States. The real result? Greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere is actually greater than when AB 32 was passed. I know we want to lead, but if we glance in our rear view mirror, we're not going to see anybody there. As I indicated before, perhaps it's time for the legislature to take over actual decision-making, still with the expert advice of the California Air Resources Board, to appropriately balance the emission-reducing measures against economic impacts. I welcome the discussion, and I ask for your aye vote so we can be in control.
We'll bring it back to the members, and I'll just start by saying that CARB, like every state agency, has its flaws, but it only has the power that the legislature gives it. If lawmakers disagree with certain CARB decisions, we can always introduce bills to override them or take board appointees to task during the confirmation process. I do not believe that the answer is to blow up CARB effectively and transfer its functions back to the legislature. That seems, first of all, impractical. And also, we do not have the expertise to do the job. We don't have the time to do it. And one of the last things we want is for any state agency to become actually more political, which would no doubt happen if CARB's functions were transferred to the legislature. So unfortunately for you, I will not be supporting your bill today, but it's always delightful to see you.
Thank you.
And with that, yes, Senator Menjivar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator You came to one of the many committees that we have here, and you see that we don't even have quorum today. Legislators are running back and forth between committees. Oftentimes, we come at the end of committees just to cast a vote. Committees run, at least for UDISH, maybe 12 hours. EQ, 5, 6, for bill after bill. Just in one day for CARB on LCFS, they had 8 hours of public comment, 8 hours. There's no way our legislature would be able to run if we spent 8 hours on just one bill. So while we do have a public process, CARB has an even in-depth public process where they have more ability to hear from the public because that is their sole purpose. To add this to the legislature, I mean, we're generalists, right? We have to be generalists on all these different things. It'd be really hard to add this to us. Additionally, the minority party is always complaining that the majority party always does these things behind closed doors, and it's not inclusive of the minority party. I don't think you would like to give this over to us, right, and only focus and have us only have the discussions on this. Even I wouldn't like that. Now, there is something to say, Senator, about appointed versus elected. I do agree with you. There could be less accountability for non-elected officials because they're not beholden to the voters and accountability of constituents, upset with them. At the same time, there also allows a layer of protection for those who aren't elected because they're also not beholden to the politics that exists here in Sacramento. So like the chair mentioned, there is weaknesses to them. I would have entertained shorter appointed terms, more accountability, more reporting. I do think there's a disconnect. I think there is, though, an ability for us to look at things that they pass. This committee is going to see a bill by Senator Hurtado that is looking to address one of those regulations as a whole. But to completely remove their ability to exist as the agency that they are now is not something I can support today.
So I want to be very clear. I care about clean air, but I also care about the people that I represent. And right now, the California Air Resource Board has massive authority, but zero accountability to working class communities like mine. They pass sweeping regulations without ever stepping foot in our districts, without asking how it impacts business, farm workers, truckers, people who are just trying to make a living. Environmental policy can't come at the expense of economic survival. That's not equity, that's elitism. If CARB won't consider real-world impact on rural and working families, then it's time, I believe, that we start pulling back some of their power and return it to the people who actually live with the consequences. We all want a clean future, but we also want a fair one. So I will be supporting your bill, and when we have quorum, I'll definitely make sure that I move the bill. I want to thank you for bringing this forward and for your commitment to our working class communities. Would you like to close, Senator? Oh, go right ahead.
Madam Vice Chair, I think you're correct, and I think that's one of the weaknesses. I think, there was an article recently about CPUC and the makeup and having, I think, what was it, like no people of color on it and no one from Southern California, and they were looking to pass increases on utilities that impacted Southern California because of the fires. I think you're 100% right. I think there should be discussion on how we revamp the makeup of these boards. There is, but I think a sweeping just removal of authority is an automatic stick versus seeing if we could just change it up a bit. But I do want to say you do make some good points on that.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Niello, would you like to close?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So much to say. I'll try to keep this as brief as I can, but to Senator Menjivar's point as to whether I would be any more comfortable having the legislature make decisions because it is controlled by the majority party. And you're right, by and large, the majority party agrees with most of those things that CARB does. So I understand where the votes would be, but I think it's important for public accountability of elected officials, particularly all that I've heard about, number one, the low carbon fuel standard, and number two, the difficulties that both public entities and private businesses are figuring out how they're going to meet the requirements of the Air Resources Board relative to zero-emission vehicles. I've had numerous meetings on that point, and CARB has indicated that they're moving ahead with that regulation. So I'm happy to have the discussion at the legislature and have you folks make that decision, and I will cast my votes and my other Republican colleagues as we think we should. So I'm fine with that, actually. The other thing is the testimony of the opposition. I didn't disagree with anything he said, nor was there anything he said that disputed what I said. He talked about the leadership of CARB and their policies, and as I said, bringing it back to the legislature still leaves CARB as a very important expert advisory board. It doesn't change that at all. It just changes the final decision. And the gentleman spoke to legislative oversight. Well, I'd have to ask, has there really been how many times has the legislature taken up a vote to either ratify or veto a regulatory policy of CARB? My guess is never. Now, I don't have all those facts in my feeble little brain, but I still strongly suspect that the answer to that question is never. But I've heard plenty of conversations, even by people on the other side of the aisle, relative to maybe CARB's gone a little bit too far. I've also had lots of discussions with people and organizations that support what I'm trying to do, but there's no way they're going to testify because a lot of them are regulated by CARB. They know this bill is going to fail, and they will have to answer to CARB after having said that they support this. So I have no illusions as to the viability of this bill. As I've often said, as a minority member, both in the Assembly and here, I have become quite adroit at crashing and burning with grace and my dignity intact. But as I've said in my presentation, this is a conversation that we should have. And I hope that this question does not die after the vote of this committee. At least I do not expect it to. And I do strongly believe that the people that are paying higher gas prices and higher utility prices, to the extent that those are driven by Air Resources Board policies, they have no idea that the fact of the matter is, regardless of what they think about climate change, they have no idea that all of those costs that are being foisted upon them have had absolutely no impact on the battle against climate change. As I said before, the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is greater now than it was when AB 32 was adopted. So I think this is an important oversight issue. I hope the conversation continues, and I still respectfully request your aye vote.